Welcome to the Grit and Grow podcast, where we talk to guests who are pursuing excellence in both sport and life, who encourage and motivate us to become better mentors, coaches, parents, and athletes. My name is Shane Sowden, head men's basketball coach at Briarcrest College, and also your co-host.
And my name is Justin Simpkins, co-host and director of Prairie Hockey Academy.
Welcome to part 2 of our episode with Lindsey Wilson, mental performance coach. In part 2, we dive into the athlete toolbox and what she breaks down to just keep things simple. Sometimes we make things too hard for our athletes, and just living and sitting in just the idea that sometimes things are challenging and difficult and hard, and that's okay. Hope you enjoy part 2.
Since starting Positive Performance in the Mental Training Academy, what are some of the greatest breakthroughs that you've experienced with your clients using these tools?
I think one of the things that is always so fun in our certification is we have all of our coaches, the ones that are our students that are becoming mental performance coaches. And so many of them are like us, right? They're like, they believe in the transformational power sports. They believe in the mindset piece of it. They want to help athletes, and they also want to start a business, but we sit in the student chair first. So they learn all of these skills as a human with a human brain. So they're getting in better shape. They're improving their relationships with their spouse. They're able to help their kid or their niece. Before that we even get to the business piece, they're going through the transformation themselves. And I think the ability to manage your own thoughts and build up that self-awareness as a human really creates a ripple effect. Even if you never become a mental performance coach or start a business, just the fact that you're doing it yourself really helps you. It creates a lot of authenticity, first of all, but it also allows you to see when other people aren't doing it, because this is a practice, right? None of us are getting it right 100% every day. Right. That just doesn't happen. And so it really does help when you're practicing it yourself, because you're just so much more aware of how to help other people with it. So I would say that maybe that's not anecdotal enough, but I see that a lot because people want to rush to help people, and it's like kind of put your oxygen mask on first, if you will. I would say the other big piece of something that I'm really proud of is we have a 6-step curriculum that I developed over doing this for 20 years. And I will say that within that, it's called the mental game plan. And within that curriculum is something called the athlete toolbox. And the really cool thing about our curriculum is it's simple, it's actionable, and it's really for every team, every athlete, every coach. And I'll just give you what the athlete toolbox is, because it's so ridiculously simple that most people are like, oh, why? First of all, even I look at it, I'm like, why did it take me 20 years to come up with this? I don't know, but it just did. But it's like, what are we doing pre-practice to get athletes mentally prepared for practice? We have all these dynamic warm-ups and all these things that are great because they prevent injury, but we're not necessarily getting them focused. What are we doing pre-game? Making sure that they have a really solid routine that they can rely on, that helps them get in the right mental state, regardless of how they're feeling that day, regardless of how the game goes, regardless of who they're playing, where they're playing. If they lost the day before, it doesn't matter, right? Getting them in the right mental state every single competition. What are they doing when they make mistakes, or how do they reset in the middle of competition? Maybe even when things are going well, but certainly when things aren't going well. How do you emotionally regulate in the middle of competition and then post-competition, which could also be post-practice, just to get the reps in of like actually figuring out how to improve. Most athletes never do this, and it is a waste of such valuable information to figure out what you can improve on without the emotions that most athletes, and I'm speaking to myself as an athlete, I was like, if I played well, it was like, whew, let's go get some ice cream. And if I didn't, it was like down in the dumps, right? And so that emotion actually isn't that helpful. And so how do we have a routine that help them actually gather information so that they can improve? So that's the athlete toolbox within the mental game plan. And that's something that, I've already seen. It's like right now, I mean, my whole mission with all this when I started 20 years ago was, why is nobody teaching this? Everybody needs to know this. Okay, I'll do it. Like that was it at 22. And so I started working with a lot of teams, and I was like, okay, well, I can't reach that many. And then I started certifying other coaches. And now there's this ripple effect of people taking it to places that sports I would never touch because I don't have any expertise, places in the world I've never been to, just different people bringing their own life experience that are going to allow them to reach different people. And so that's a big part of our mission, and it's happening. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And I don't know if we fully explained that earlier in the podcast either. I mean, you do mental performance coaching with athletes, and that's a piece of your business. But as you mentioned a couple times now, you also have built up this side of the business where you coach coaches, which I think is really cool, because it allows that ripple effect. It allows you to multiply, and then be able to really impact change in places you never thought you could be, and you really couldn't be just on your
Yeah.
own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We have people
So
all
which is
over.
great.
A lot of parents have come through too, where they're like former athletes, or, it's like
Mm.
coaches and parents that are like in the sports world, and kind of like I was. They're looking around and they're like, why are these athletes not learning this? They're all struggling with the same thing. My kid and all their friends, they're all struggling with the same thing, and they
Mm.
need this. And so they're like, okay, well, I guess I'll teach it to them. So they come work with us.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing about when you're onboarding new coaches and working through your system, and this just this past weekend we were spending time with my in-laws, and I have an amazing mother-in-law and father-in-law. Of course, this leads to a great wife as well. But my mother-in-law is a life coach and has been doing
Oh,
this work
cool.
for quite a while, and she does some. She does some fantastic work, and I was just asking her a little bit about it, and she just said one of the things that she's seeing that is challenging is that when individuals are venturing into new things, and whether that be new businesses or relationships or whatever it might be, and she said, but they're just going in without having any healing first in
Hmm.
regards to their life. And it was just, with this kind of conversation was around forgiveness and a different side of mental performance. But as you talked about, even in order to develop coaches, you need to prepare that coach and have them kind of sit through this first and work through some of this minutia that they might have in their own thought patterns,
Yeah.
before they can actually influence. And anyway, that's that story with my mother-in-law and her conversation just really resonated with what you're saying as well. And so as coaches, this brings us back to a book we've spoke about previous podcasts, on something that's influenced both Shane and I, is Inside Out Coaching, a book by Joe
Hmm.
Ehrman, and
Yeah.
just this inside out process that we have to take as coaches before we can actually truly become transformational,
Yeah.
out, right? So
Yeah.
lots packed into that statement for me. I think one piece for me is that I really wanted to ask you about was, you talked about community playing a big role for athletes facing setbacks. Can you just kind of unpack that for people? Because mental performance, some of this can create roadblocks, and I think can create silos.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, absolutely. So yeah, when we're talking about belief work, we're talking about um, the way that we teach how to maintain belief work is really in four different ways. One is subconscious work. Another is in conscious thought work. Another is in systems and routines. And then the final is in community and team. And I think one of the most fundamental um, ways that mental performance training can impact individual people, is when you do it in community. Because when if I'm going and working with a team, for example, there's a couple just messages they're getting. One, that this stuff is important, right? They're getting that message immediately. They're also getting the message that this is like normalized, that everyone's struggling with it, and it takes work. And so you're immediately getting this message that you're not alone. And I think that is really what like spurred me on, like when I was in college, is again, I just looked at so many people struggling with it, and everybody thought that they were the only ones struggling with it, right? I think that's like human nature in general. We're kind of selfish in that way. Like we're always thinking we're only in our excuse me, we're in our own mind. And so we're always thinking about what we're struggling with. And I think in sports also, in the past, at least, it's been very much like, who wants to raise their hand and say they're struggling mentally and then
Mm.
hope that their coach puts them in, You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't, it never really tracked until recently where people started talking about it more. And then it becomes this safe place. I mean, we're talking about like psychological safety, which is such an important part of any team. If you're not creating any kind of vulnerability, you're not talking about failure, you're not talking about how hard it is, it's such a missed opportunity because it's such a common experience. Right. I mean, what athletes are doing really at any level. And I do say that, like, even because it's all perception, right? I mean, what is really stressful for a little league player is really stressful for them. Right. So I think anybody that's stepping on a playing field should be so freaking proud of themselves because it's hard. Most people do not want to do it, really. Right. It's fun. It's exciting. But the psychological component, I was working with a team, a Division I team, maybe 5 months ago or something. And I was like, what you guys are doing is so hard. Right. I mean, and now they have all this other stuff. They have NIL and social media and all this stuff. But like the psychological pressure and stress to get up every day. I mean, everybody knows that it's hard to get up for 5:30 a.m. workouts. I don't even know if they do those anymore. That's what we did. Both ways.
They should be. They should be.
Yeah. So everybody knows that it's physically hard to like play at that level. What I think is like the invisible stress and the really hard thing is to keep yourself psychologically healthy through all that. And hopefully more than healthy, but like primed and like psychologically sharp, if you will. And that is a hard, hard thing. And I don't really know what your original question was.
Just community, right? When
so
we're
anyway,
struggling.
yeah. So like talking about that helps. It is a huge help to not feel alone in that. Because otherwise you're thinking there and you're like, why is this so much harder for me than it is for anybody else? Which again is back to their original thought, which is like, that's a lie. You say that to yourself, and then you start looking for evidence that you're the only one struggling with this. And then you become the one that's struggling with it instead of that thought awareness of like, it can't be me. It can't just be me. And so that community component is really important, really important.
Right. And we know this from, let's swing the pendulum real far and say from groups like AA. I mean, we recognize that community is where people need to be when they're struggling and they need to heal together. And so why can't it, I mean, it shouldn't be any different psychologically when it comes to our mental performance.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so you're right, creating conversation and dialogue around it, good for you. I mean, to be able to address that entire team to say what you guys are doing is really hard. And you actually need to create this space and this vulnerability to talk about it so that we can actually go out there and perform.
Yeah.
Because at the brighter stages, like the brighter lights, the bigger stages, it gets harder and harder.
It does.
To perform in a like big group. So
yeah.
When we were college athletes, nobody was talking about this. Like, why is there no mental training? Why are we not emphasizing this?
Yeah.
And even though it's more acceptable and we hear professional athletes, college athletes, talking about this more, it's much more widely accepted. My perspective is we're not even close to doing it well yet on the scale that we should be. And one of the things I've learned in the last couple of years, like my team had a great run this year, really successful season, and something earlier on in the year, we're going, every team goes through highs and lows, peaks and valleys throughout a season. And this, whether you want to use the word vulnerability or honesty or creating a safe space or psychological safety, whatever it is, I still feel most high-level athletes at the college and professional level, even high school level, are really hesitant to share what they're struggling with. Extremely. And so I started taking the approach this year of like, sharing my own. So like with my guys being like, okay, here's my fears. Here's actually what I'm afraid of, and here's what's keeping me up at night going into this weekend. But then ending it off with belief. I believe in you guys. I believe in us. Yeah. When we are together in this way, we can accomplish everything and more, right? That sort of thing. And so all that to say, what would be your message to parents, coaches, student athletes, just to those that are hesitant to open up that way. Because I think we need people to be open that way.
A couple things. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think that example is so perfect because that is what we teach. It's kind of like I'll go first mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like coaches and parents, we don't get to sit up on our high horse and tell athletes to be more mentally tough, right? Like or be more vulnerable, right? Like doing it ourselves, holding the mirror up to the places that we're doing it or not doing it, and not doing it perfectly, but practicing all this stuff is so important. So kudos to you for doing that. I think the other thing that is so much of, and I touched on this already, but so much of my work now, I feel like when I first started my career, it was like, I felt like I was shouting from the rooftops, like, this is important, this is important, this is important. Everybody like, hey, this is important. And I feel like now a lot of people do know that it's important. And it's almost like, I wouldn't say we're on the other side, but there's enough people that are aware of it. And with the technology where it is, it's like now people are getting overwhelmed with where to start. Like they don't know what to do on a Tuesday afternoon practice because they've read all the books, they've listened to all the podcasts, they've, YouTubed it and saw the videos, and they're like, yeah, but what do I actually do? And so I think some of the problem now is this paralysis because people get overwhelmed. And again, like that is so much of my job now is like the experience of having done this 20 years and the curation of like, if you start with a pre-practice routine, you'll be like in a really good spot, right? Or the mistake ritual, so people know what to do with mistakes. Like the fact of the matter is that most teams and most coaches do not have hours and hours and hours to do mental performance training every week. So how can we get it in 5 minutes before practice, 5 minutes after practice, maybe a 30-minute workshop here and there, and really start from the mentality of like, we're going to put in really simple foundational tools, and then we're going to build off that. Like athletes do not need 20 tools. They don't. They need a handful. They need some really simple, actionable things that they can do. And then we get really good at that. And then, they get to another level and they start really building up their awareness. Then maybe they could add in some other things. But honestly, the overcomplication of mental performance tools is like one of the biggest enemies to people actually doing this. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It shouldn't actually. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming when you just step in for the first time. You're like, where do I start? And it's way too complicated, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And that's been so much of my work, probably in the last like 10 years, where I started noticing people really wanted to do it. And it was like the devil's in the details, right? It's like they wanted to do it. They believed that it was important. And it's like, again, what do I do on Tuesday? No idea. I've read all this stuff, but I don't know what to actually do. And then the brain starts making it really complicated. And that's why we have our 6-part system. Honestly, like that's why I came up with it, because everybody was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And it's like, just do this. Literally, just do this. It's a little bit like, wanting to get in better shape. And you're like, should I run a marathon? Should I learn how to snatch and clean and do powerlifting? Or it's like, well, yeah, maybe, but not today. Like let's get started with a really simple, we don't want to get you injured. So like, let's start with a really simple weight training, program that you can do and lay a foundation for your whole body to be strong. And then we can graduate to some other things later.
That's really good. In a you go first type of, spirit here. My question for you, Lindsey, is you were, you actually mentioned a stat earlier, 0.01% of athletes make it to Division I, and you were determined you were going to be one of those. So is Shane. I'm one of the other people on the larger percentile. So I'm on this podcast today with 2 Division I athletes and Division III guy over here, but that's okay. But in that, you were drafted to the WNBA. You went on to play, professional basketball, women's basketball across, I think, 6 different countries across Europe, and had some incredible experiences where you were able to use your sport to create, some experiences and some memories for yourself. In that, what were some of your greatest fears, and did they change from, college to draft night to tryouts in the WNBA and so on and so forth?
I think I look back, my fears were so stupid. Like, I was scared that I wasn't going to make the WNBA, which, by the way, I didn't. I actually got cut. I went to training camps like every year practically, and I just kept getting cut. And I remember thinking like, how can I be a mental performance coach if I didn't even make the WNBA? That was my thought pattern. Like, and now I look back and I remember those experiences. Even one time, I talked about this on my podcast before, like, I knew I was going to get cut, but I had to make it through training camp. Like, the mentality of knowing you're going to get cut and still being through training camp, like, that's what I take with me. Mm-hmm. So like the fear, you mentioned this already, but like, it's about who you get to become. It's not really about the team you play for or even the level that you're at. It's about who you get to become through sport. And so my fears were so stupid, like when I look back on them, to think that I'm actually a better mental performance coach because I didn't make it, right. Because I had that experience of getting cut multiple times and the pain of that.
Yeah.
I remember also, again, I look back and I remember being like so worried that, I obviously as an athlete, that you can't play forever. So I knew I wanted to like have a career and have kids. And I remember in my 20s, when I first started, I remember looking at an athlete that was like 30 and I was like, I can't play till I'm 30. Like, I'm so worried I'm not going to have like a desk. I don't know if I was worried I wasn't going to have a desk job or I don't know. Like, I was like, I got to get back to America and I got to like start my life. Right. Like the things you think about at 23 are ridiculous. And I ended up playing until I was 30. And again, the person that I got to become through that experience of living abroad for 8 years and the struggles of that and the challenges and the adventure were like, I would trade that for any job that I could have had in my 20s, in America. It was like amazing. And so the things you're scared about that end up being like, I don't know, they're not the things that you think are like scary are actually the things that help you become who you're supposed to be, I guess.
Your biggest fears can become your superpower.
Yeah.
That's good. So if you were speaking to a group of young athletes today, and we've read and heard some of this talk about how in transitions, going from one team to the next or one level to the next is sometimes where student athletes might suffer, a lot of their greatest mental performance setbacks, fears and challenges. We in my world, we are constantly recruiting almost a new crop of student athletes every year, and those athletes are generally leaving and going to the next level throughout our prep school. And so what would you say to that group of, young freshman athletes, or even if they're not freshmen, coming in for the first time or going to that next level for the first time as well?
I feel like I kind of have to remind myself of this. Maybe we all do, is like, it's hard because it's hard. Like, it's not hard because you're doing it wrong. Like, I think that message of, again, it's kind of the normalizing of it too, is like, or like, I always love the saying, like, if it were easy, everybody would do it. Like, the hard is something to embrace, not to like think, oh my God, I'm weak, or I'm doing it wrong, or, if only I were something else, then it wouldn't be this hard. No, the hard is part of it. Like, that's the good stuff. I think that for myself, even whenever I bring that mentality into, something I'm struggling with my business or something that I'm struggling with in my life, it moves the conversation in my head, at least, from like, again, you're doing it wrong, or it would be easier for other people, and into just like sitting with it. And again, I think the other message is like, this is the good stuff. Like, this is the stuff that's going to make you ready, because I think there's this tendency to look at the next level and think that the people that are there didn't experience everything that you're experiencing. Like, somehow they bypassed all that. And it's just not true. Like, it's like the cost of admission.
Right.
That's what I tell my coaching students, like, you want a business making money as a mental performance coach, like whatever they're struggling with right now, like, this is the cost of admission. If it were easy, everybody would do it. Everybody would sign up to be a mental performance coach if you could just put your shingle out and everybody signs up. Like
Right.
this is what separates the people that are like for real.
Mhm.
And so that message, I think, is something, again, that benefits me even just in my life when I'm struggling with the voices in my head.
Well, I think this whole idea of imposter syndrome is so prevalent. Like I remember how it must have been 3-4 years ago. My friend JP Nurbin from Thrive On Challenge, he was my mentor coach, and he said, Shane, he said, more people can identify with your struggles and
Mm,
what you're going through right now in your environment, in your job, than going and reading the latest book from Mike Krzyzewski. He's like, because there's hardly anybody that is experiencing what he's experiencing, but he's like, there's probably thousands of people going
yeah.
through what you're going through, and they need to hear from you and not from him.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, you're full of crap. But then you sat there and I said, like, oh yeah, you're actually really, really right. And so that brings me just, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I find so many coaches and parents who are coaches either come to me at some of our clinics, training sessions, and they want to fix their kid or they want to
Mm,
fix their player. Um, and we gloss over really quickly, but do the work yourself first on
mm,
you.
yeah.
And I've learned just even through parenting with my kids, at least, more is caught than taught. You still have to teach and be intentional. But when
Hmm.
they see me doing the work, when they see me living it out, and this is really hard because working through that belief in yourself, and then like, even through what Justin's mother-in-law said, dealing with that internal, it's tough, but we're so, I think it's difficult for people to take that first step. And just
Hmm.
speak to that really quickly again for coaches and parents, but like to do the work first in conjunction with trying to help their student athlete or their kid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that I feel really strongly about, and I think distinguishes us from some other things people could do to sort of build their mental performance coaching business. Is like when I decided to do a certification, that's such a big part of what I believe. I think that it's the authenticity comes through in everything that you do, and it doesn't mean that you have to be
Mm,
doing it exactly the way that your athletes do, but I think that they pick up if you're just, again, sitting sort of in your glass house, kind of just telling them what to do. I think it's really, they figure it out and they just don't take you as seriously. And so
mm,
I think that's really, really important. And I think, again, it goes back to that. If we want to teach them tools, we have to practice them ourselves. And that allows us to let them learn these tools too. Because I think if we're not, and this is hard as a parent, right? Because you want to rescue your kid,
Right.
you don't want them to be in pain, but allowing them, feeling like you have given them, again, like taught them how to fish, right? You're letting them fish, and you are also sort of tending to your own personal needs, and that
mm,
takes work. I mean, it just does,
mhm.
right? Because it feels like you want to swoop in and you want to tell them what to do, and you want to, you're really trying to save them from pain, and that's but again, it's really not about them, it's about you. And so I think that, from a parenting perspective, is really important, and again, easier said than done. But all of this is better when everybody's doing it, because then everybody has the tools to work on it themselves.
It's not a band-aid just to like, hey, go do this and then everything's gonna be better. It might improve a little bit, but like it's more of a holistic approach.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing
Mhm.
with, that's one of the challenges with mental performance training, right? Is like, if I took you guys in the weight room and we worked out for 3 weeks, you would notice a physical difference. You would see it in your body.
Mhm.
And mental performance doesn't have a visual cue, right? There's no feedback loop in that sense. So um, it does take patience. It also takes um, paying attention to what is shifting and what's working, and celebrating it, noticing when your
Mhm.
thoughts, when you're able to shift your thoughts, noticing when you're able to recover after mistakes, noticing when you're able to be a little less emotional after games. Like, you have to notice to keep up your motivation to do it also.
Mhm.
I think this is great. Lindsay, I could ask you 10 more questions. And at the same time, I want to recognize that we're an hour into this too. I I do want to probably close off, but before I do, is there anything that you feel like you want to leave to some of our audience that you haven't already?
No, I would just say come on over to Instagram. I'm at Lindsey Positive Perform. Come say hi. And of course, on our website, we're on Instagram if you're interested in learning about our certification program or a program just for coaches. Those are all there. And of course, I have a podcast too called the Mindset Coach Academy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will note all those in the notes of the podcast and make sure our listeners have access to those. And when we do release your episode, we'll tag that too, and hopefully we'll get some people over to Positive Coach Performance as well for you. So thank you for just your vulnerability today, just being open, talking about just your struggles, and then how you started to work through mental performance coaching and chose to make a difference in other people's lives because of the impact it had for you. Appreciated today's episode.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you, Shane and Justin, so much. I'm always so happy to meet other like-minded people that are here for the right reasons. And just, we all love sports, right? And we believe that they could really transform lives. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we do love sport. And at the same time, I just love what sport has the ability to do for our next generation. And I'll sign off with Joe Ehrman's quote that he says, the greatest myth in America is that sports develop character. And he says that they should, and they ought to, but it takes a coach to be intentional and to possess character first to be able to use sport in a positive, transformative way first. So coaches, there's a lot of pressure on coaches these days. And it's why there, people like yourself, Lindsay, being able to train up some coaches to give them the tools so they can make an impact on our next generation.
Absolutely. Thanks for your guys' work.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Grit and Growth podcast. We hope that you enjoyed today's guest and the answers that they were able to give and the stories they were able to tell. If you did enjoy today's episode, we'd ask that you would just follow or subscribe to our podcast. It does help us get the word out and our message. Thanks again. Have a great day.